Okay, so Book of Ruth, chapter 1, I think. Chapter 1 and 2. Let me turn there. Ooh, I don't even know where Ruth is in this Bible. I better find it. After Chronicles. Okay, hold on. Everybody find Ruth while I do too. This Bible has a different order and I have no idea. Okay, page 1741. Okay. 1741. All right. It's right after, no. Okay, I thought it was right after Ecclesiastes. I was like, no way. Oh, it's after Song of Songs. Okay. All right. Cool. So let me start with your comments. I think by now some of your comments should have been answered, and then we'll get into the text. So today we'll do only chapter 1 and 2. Let's see. Yeah, chapter 1 and 2. And then next time we'll do chapter 3 and 4. So did I ask you to do Ruth 1 to 4 for this time? Because a lot of you covered the whole thing. Is that what I said? So what's the assignment for tomorrow? What does the syllabus say?
It says...
Mara said, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Song of Songs 1 to 5.
Okay, I see. Okay, and then just, why don't we just continue? What about Wednesday? What's the assignment for Wednesday?
Song of
I just
Songs
put it in the
6.
chat.
Okay, thank you. So today's Ruth 1 to 4. And what about, thank you. Okay, songs. Okay. I see. Oh, I see what I did. I see. Okay, so I'm switching it around, obviously. So yes, so we'll, okay, sorry about that. So yes, we'll do Ruth again tomorrow. So you can do a reading assignment focused specifically on chapter 3 and 4. Some of you already, I'm even hesitant to give you a reading assignment. Should I give you another reading assignment? Because it feels like you've done it already. I'm not going to do that. Okay, no reading assignment for tomorrow. There, take a break. But we'll finish Ruth tomorrow. Olivera, you have a question?
No, I was just going to say that you had said previously that you wouldn't do Song of Songs.
Yeah, I won't. And then Butterfield reminded me that Monday we have class. So next Monday we'll do a Song of Songs. But this week, okay, so take note, everybody, of the new syllabus. Tomorrow, Book of Ruth, and then John for Wednesday and Thursday. Whatever you see for John. So Wednesday, John 1 to 2, and then you know what? I want you to read the whole book. So read half of the book by Wednesday and read the other half by Thursday. I'm going to put all this in the Blackboard announcements. And then Monday, we'll do the Song of Songs, whole thing. So read the whole thing. So the new assignment is tomorrow, nothing. Wednesday, half of the book. Thursday of John. So Thursday, the other half of the book of John. And then next Monday, all of the Song of Songs. Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
So do we have a reading assignment for tomorrow?
Nope, nothing.
Okay.
My bad.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
you're looking up.
You covered the whole thing, so I'll go over this right now. Great. Okay, so Anderson starts out. Very interesting questions, Anderson, actually, for this particular paper. Is Anderson here? Yes, good. Okay, first of all, he's asking, why is the book of Judges mentioned, right? It says here, right, in the days of the judges. And this is actually a really good question. So let me explain. If you read the history of Israel, right, you know, when they entered the land, there was no kings yet. They were what they would call judges. And the problem with the period of the judges, I don't know if you've read that period. This is in Judges 1 and 2, right? It's complete chaos, right? God is not there. There is no law. There is no king. There is nothing. And it says actually in the book of Judges at the beginning when they introduce judges, or maybe at the end, I can't remember, but possibly at the end, right before Ruth comes into the scene, they say everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. This is bad, right? Everybody doing what is right in their own eyes means they're not following any type of law outside of their own, right, desires, right? So So the book of Judges, or the time of the Judges before the first king comes along, this is this intermediate period from the time that the people entered the land of Israel and then had a king. This is about maybe 100 or 200 years, I'm not sure. You had these judges, and it was chaos, and there were no laws. And so right in this context, right, Ruth is written. Now, can anybody, you should ask yourselves, why is the author putting in this mention of the book of Judges? And how is the book of Ruth a response to the chaos of the book of Judges? Anybody have any ideas? Let's think about that a little bit. This is interesting. A very interesting detail that, thank you, Anderson, for pointing out. Williams, talk, go ahead.
Oh, I said it's more social cohesion and unity. Because if you have societies that have no central tenets of morality, the societies can't grow. They just collapsing on themselves because you have people stabbing each other in the face, people cheating on each other with husbands, murders are rampant. So you need to have some type of way to have like some parable or narratives of where we can adjust, we can basically say this is our level of morality and this is where we stand.
Yes.
So like,
yeah.
In America, we have, and like the example I'll give in America, we have like cop shows or even army shows or superhero films, and that's supposed to be our level of morality, shown back to us as if as in a Greek tragedy or whatever.
Yes, very good, very good. So this narrative might have been written during the period of the Judges in a way to show this is what social cohesiveness looks like, and this is what is the foundation of social cohesiveness. And in this book, what is the foundation of the social cohesion that you see in this book by Williams? What do you think is what is the book trying to say is the foundation of community, of social cohesion?
Family and family relationships, intergenerational family and marriage are the cohesion of this society.
Yes, you can say that, right? And some commentators say that, the concept of chesed, right, which is love, right, is what is being taught to the Israelites at this moment where they have lost all sense of order and system, right? So it's a kind of lesson. So notice there's no king, there is no rule. This is not the father's house being established during this time of chaos. Later with the kings, right? You have the father's house being very well established. But here, this is a mother's house approach. When a time where there is no law, how can we still survive as human beings when there is no law, no father's house to enforce the law? Well, the mother's house will say through love. We need to learn to love. At that moment when we love, we don't need the law. We can survive even though there is no law, right? So this book is written at a time where the land of Israel was suffering from a breakdown of the father's house, right? Moses had died, right? There was no more lawmaker, right? Remember Moses, he's the one who brought the law into the land, right? So Moses dies, there's no more lawmaker. The father's house has crumbled. And again, just to be sure you guys are getting this, when I say father's house, I don't mean, right, toxic masculinity. I don't mean necessarily toxic patriarchy. It has goodness in itself, right? The father's house has a lot of good. First of all, the father's house is where the law is found, and there's a tremendous good with the coming of the law into societies, right? Coming of a type of law. So father's house breakdown, right? I'm never saying that the father's house is the bad guy, right? It's just one way, right? So father's house breaks down. Ruth is saying in the breakdown of the law, we can still survive through love, right? Rudolph, go ahead.
So in answer to the first part of your question as to why the rule of the judges is mentioned, if I understood correctly, the judges at the time, some voices were saying that it was a period of about 300 years, were more tribal leaders and natural, mostly men of means who had the wherewithal to lead others. So within that period, that whole concept of kinsman, redeemer, and redemption was born as a safety net, if you will, as a social safety net for the ones who don't have. There were a lot of people who didn't have, a lot of people who fell into despair, and however it worked, somebody at some point recognized that we need to do something. and that doing something created this kinsman redemption, which is an absurd kind of principle in my view, by the way. But you know, I'll listen a little more. So.
Okay, so just a quick nuance. The law of the kinsman redeemer was written by Moses, right? So this was before the judges. He's the one who came up with most of these laws. And it does make sense in the context of the time. If a woman lost her husband, she basically goes out to the street to beg. Like, there is no hope for her. And she becomes very vulnerable also to sexual assault and so forth. She becomes, there's no protection, right? Because she doesn't have the father's house anymore. She's left the father's house in the terms of her parents, right? Her husband was her protector, so she has neither food nor clothing, no protection against sexual assault. So the brother marries her is a way of saying, you belong to this household. Doesn't need to love her, just needs to. Sometimes they would just sleep with her once, just to ensure there was a child, and then she would be part of the household. There's a story from a South African author in South Africa, and I can't believe I forgot his name. He's very well known. It's a similar story of a, so he's a white South African. He talks about a woman who was a farmer during the time when there was a lot of conflict between blacks and whites in South Africa, and a lot of violence, right? Both ways, right? And this woman is a single woman. She's a farmer, and she's raped, right? By couple guys and a very young boy also. So it's a very, very traumatizing story. I'm still like reeling from it. But there's an older black man there who says, let me marry you, right? He's already married, he has a family, but he says, let me marry you. And it's not that they love each other or nothing. It's like, this is the only way in that context that she will be protected from further sexual assault, is that if she's part of this household, right? So it's very similar culturally to where we are in the book of Judges, where if you're not married, anybody can do anything to you. There's no law for women. The law is the husband, right? So if you don't have a husband, there is nothing to protect. There's no cops, there's no court system, there's no laws. It's the husband that protects you. You have no husband, you're fucked, basically, as a woman in that context. So this is why the law of the kinsman, or at least the law of the brother marrying, is a way to ensure that woman is protected, and also that her deceased husband has a descendants, because at the time, if you don't have children, who will take care of you when you're old? Nobody. It's the children who take care of you. So this is also to ensure that that woman will have someone to take care of her. Does that help a little bit, Rudolph, with the context?
It does, and maybe I shouldn't have called the principle of it absurd. It's that it had to exist, that society was not capable of changing its mode and had to invent this kind of sidebar law just to protect individuals. So that shows you how discombobulated the entire society was at this point.
Yeah. And I just want to add to what you're saying, that some of these laws we think are really primitive, but we have to realize that the law of the time was even worse, right? So for example, if a husband died, often the woman was expected to die also, right? So there was usually no survival expected of that woman, right? So there is a number of laws, the same problem in the Quran, right? We read the laws on women in the Quran and we become very offended, but we don't realize the context of the time and how these laws in the Quran, as well as in the Hebrew Bible, were actually very progressive, even though they're still imperfect, right? Absolutely. Some of these laws, you're like, what the hell, right? So in our eyes, right? But at the time, it was really an attempt to, the goal was to protect the woman within the patriarchy. They were not going to destabilize the patriarchy. That was not even an option, right? But how do we, within the patriarchy, ensure that these women are safe? That would be the idea here. Williams, go ahead.
I was going to say, if anybody could know, the practice actually survived up until a couple years ago. The last Civil War widow actually married somebody, and she was still collecting a pension up until last year. She died last year. And it was the practice of young women marrying older men who could take care of them. specifically because of the fact that, but the practice has endured for a very long time. And she actually talked about how, like, one of the things that you did during the Civil War, during the 1930s and 40s, even during the Depression, or even now, was to marry someone who could take care of you. Even if it wasn't a sexual relationship, it was just because women they're not on the same level of society. Society's not balanced to take care of women's needs. So, like, older Civil War veterans would marry young girls who were like 15 or 16 to get their pension. So.
Right, very good. Yes, that's an excellent example of how we did it. Excellent. Rudolph, did you have a follow-up? I thought I saw your hand pop up. No, okay, good. All right, so yeah, so thank you, Anderson, for that really good question that triggered really nice. So yeah, so also, Anderson, you're asking, why in the world, what is Ruth doing, right? Why is she insisting to follow Naomi? And then you answer your own question, right? That was pretty good. So I'll share what you said. Where's Anderson? Ah, there you are. Yes, I'll share what you said. So basically, yes, you're right in your answer. The mother-in-law, if she doesn't have any children, she's as good as dead, right? No one can take care of her. There is no nursing homes or daycare system for adults like in China, right? She's just in the street, right? So Ruth knows this, and that's why, and we'll see today when we study that passage, she basically sacrifices her own possibility of remarriage, because that's what Ruth, that's why Naomi is telling her, go back, don't stay with me. Go back, get another husband, live your life. And Ruth is like, no, because Ruth knows if she dumps Naomi, Naomi will die in the street of starvation, right? And so she, in a way, sacrificing her own feminine journey to protect Naomi, right? So that's where we can see the extent of Ruth's character, right? So very nicely analyzed, Anderson. Good. Anderson, you asked about the kinsman. I think I answered that, right? Are we good? Okay. All right, let's go to Rudolph. By the way, I had to say, all of you this time, I think you're getting so good at these reading assignments. Like, I really loved you guys' questions. You guys are really, like, your brain is starting to awaken. I'm really seeing great, great questions. So yes, Rudolph, yes, a lot of you are complaining, this is such a patriarchal text, where is the mother's house, right? So yes, we are entrenched in patriarchy in this text, but the interesting part is how these women navigate patriarchy and in a way become empowered, right? So this is the way that these women find their own path to survival, while not only navigating, but they're able to they're really quite intelligent and street smart, right? In the way that they navigate patriarchy. So, and this is, so in a way, patriarchy in this text is transfigured by the strong female characters. Let's also remember that the text is named after a woman, which is unusual, right? So we will see how Ruth, in a way, she doesn't subvert patriarchy, but she transfigures it. And this is what we'll have to study, right? So hope that helps. And then I mentioned how I don't believe, a number of commentators also don't believe she did really convert, right? This is Ruth the Moabite. And this is important that she stays that way. Let's see. Yeah, Rudolph asked a question to Williams, so I'm just transmitting. So Williams, would you think that this book is a self-help book? What do you think, Williams?
This is more a hippie book. Sorry, I keep getting up. It's more a hippie book. No, because all right. So there are certain phases in the Bible where you can see like the lineage about certain things and certain eras. So like the Book of Genesis is about the foundational relationships between man and God. Ecclesiastes is more about the fact that humans can now reason, and we're philosophizing our reason, and we're saying like, if I'm going to die at some point, what does it matter if I do anything? And like my relationship with God, I'm reflecting back on that. But this is more like a hippie book about peace and love, and about learning that like we're all easier and more willing to have these interactions, and we don't need to have kings or anyone else to tell us what to do.
Very nice.
So I feel like that's why it's a hippie material. No, but
I'll take that.
I'm saying if you want to think about it like a sociologist, that's what they may say.
It works because it's all about community versus the state, right? So yeah, I like it. It works very well. Thank you, Williams. Okay, Giannakopoulos. a lot of you were really disturbed at the manipulation of Boaz, right? This is the moment within patriarchy, right, where the women are really, and we'll see, right? Was he really coerced? We have to read the text and really understand what happened. But it is a very disturbing scene. I agree. A lot of you are uncomfortable. What is she doing at night? All, you know, what's the word? All sexy, right? And what's going on? What did these guys end up doing? The text is very silent, right? It's like the Hebrew Bible in general is very discreet, but we're going to read that text and we're going to read the language and what the Hebrews usually, when they talk about sexuality, they use metaphors. And we're going to analyze some of these metaphors, right? They never really, they're not very, the sexual material in the Bible is very subtle. The Hebrews are very modest, right? Unlike the Canaanite counterparts, if you read some of their texts, very graphic. It's almost pornographic, right? But the Hebrews are always very modest. So we're going to see something is going on, which you're right, very fishy. And we'll talk about it tomorrow, but I'll just give you a heads up. Actually, no, I won't. We'll just study the text tomorrow and you'll see a little bit some of these expressions. What does lying at his feet mean? So we'll talk about that. It's a very strange expression. If you don't know the Hebrew context, you have no clue what that means. So we'll explain that and see what really happened between Ruth and Boaz, and we'll do that tomorrow. Let's see, Butterfield. If I can read my writing. Yeah, Butterfield, you're sensing the transgressive climate, right? You're seeing Naomi tell Ruth, go to the threshing floor. And then Boaz saying, let no one know there was a woman at the threshing floor. So we know Ruth wasn't supposed to be there, right? This is risque, right? To use the French expression, it's a very risque moment. And what is happening? Why is this text in the Bible, right? We'll be talking about that tomorrow. Again, Butterfield asking about lying at his feet. We'll talk about that. And yes, Butterfield also complaining about the patriarchal overtones of the book and how is she a strong woman. We will look as we study the text, right? This is true. A lot of you are like, yeah, compared to Job, you know, who's sitting there screaming at the heavens, or Ecclesiastes, who's just like transgressing everything. Ruth seems very tame, right? Very tame, very prim, right? Very virtuous. But actually, when you read the text, you will see beneath this primness a giant of a woman, right? I don't know if you saw the movie Jane Eyre. Let's see, how many of you saw that movie? Jane Eyre, anybody? Okay, nobody, just two of us, me and Edmonds. Y'all, this is literature. What's going on? Y'all, I'm not even asking you to read the book. Okay, I'm putting it in the chat. Tonight, homework, Jane Eyre, by us. Who the? Jane, wait, what's the name of the, Jane Austen? Is that, thank you, Edmonds, is that it? Yes, okay.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's one of the Bronte sisters.
Oh, it's,
Sorry.
I always get that confused.
No
Okay.
way. Emily Bronte? We don't know. Bronte.
Charlotte Bronte.
Charlotte.
Pretty
Oh
sure
my
Charlotte.
God. So I need to start reading this stuff. I'm so uncultured. Charlotte Bronte. Okay, thank you, Jane Eyre. If you see, I saw the movies, but so if you read the book or see the movie, this is a woman who's very, seems very bland, but you can sense beneath the blandness a kind of volcano. This is Ruth, right? And we have to read carefully to see that. So hopefully Butterfield, you will be reconciled with Ruth. Where is Butterfield? But yes, by the time we're done, you will see a little more who she truly is, right? But of course, within patriarchy, she can't go around railing against God or, being a kind of hedonist like Ecclesiastes, right? This is the male privilege, right? In these texts. Okay. Very good observation. I like that. Who saves who? Does Boaz save Ruth or does Ruth save Boaz? We're going to talk about that, right? In this text, we're going to see there is actually a mutual saving, right? And we'll see how. It's not just Boaz who saves Ruth, like some of you are complaining. Yeah, this is like Disney, right? Like Walt Disney's story where you wait for Prince Charming and then he sweeps you off your feet and gives you a castle. This is not what's good. She's also saving him. We will see how, right? There is really equality between these two guys. And by the way, I didn't say this, but I will probably eventually, but they're both called the same name in the text, just to show how, you know, there is an equality between them in the eyes of the narrator. In Hebrew, she's called Eshet Chayil, and he is called Gibor Chayil. Okay, I will translate. Eshet is woman, Gibor is man, and Chayil is an interesting concept, translated poorly as virtuous, but it's not that at all. Chayil means actually literally a soldier, warrior. So she's like warrior woman and he is warrior man. I mean, if you translate it literally, Chayil is in the modern Hebrew, Chayil means somebody who is part of Tza'av, the Israeli army. That's a Chayil, right? So basically it's not virtue like, you know, like a Victorian virtue where she's, you know, wearing long dresses and, you know, whatever. This is a kind of the connotation is that she is a warrior woman and he's a warrior man, and they are, and that is what their virtue is that they're so powerful in terms of their character. So it's not about her being, you know, malleable and flexible and passive and obedient. No, she's a warrior. And you can only see this if you read very close to the text, because she does look like she's just obeying everybody. She's not, right? Every moment she's gonna pull out a sword, right? Or at least do some kind of gesture, which is so courageous and audacious and risque, right? So they're actually described in the text as equals in terms of their character. They're both warriors in their inner spirit. And so we know that there is not one who is inferior to the other. Both in a way redeem each other, and we'll see how that will happen. So thank you, O, for that observation. Bernard actually says, nice interpretation, Bernard. Where's Bernard? She's hiding.
I'm here.
Right. Bernard mentions she actually believes Ruth is the real redeemer of the story, and that works too, right? So she is the one actually that holds all the... Ruth is the one that provokes every turn in the story. She is the plot queen. Boaz is the one following. Some of you already noticed and are uncomfortable with that, right? So Ruth is really the one who, in spite of her submissiveness, is actually leading the plot, right? And so yes, Bernard, very well observed. She is the actual redeemer, not only of Naomi, not only of Boaz, but of Israel. And we're going to see how, right? Okay, great. You guys had such good comments. I was just in ecstasy, like in total beatitude as I was reading your comments, because I was like, yes, 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 this is so good, such good questions. Okay, Christo Dulu. Yes, Christo Dulu. Christo Dulu, you will share with us. So Christo Dulu is uncomfortable, of course, with this scene with Boaz on the threshing floor, but you mentioned a story in the Quran about Aisha, which you say similar. Can you tell us that story? And remind us who Aisha is.
Aisha is considered one of the favorite wives of the Prophet Muhammad. She is a very big personality, a very active woman. But there is a story of her where after a battle, she is kind of left behind because she went looking for something she dropped. And she spends the night with one of the soldiers and then is returned to the Prophet the next morning. Naturally, this causes a big stir that of rumors of adultery, and it is in that context that the verses around adultery are revealed to the Prophet, saying you must have certain evidences, you must have witnesses, you can't just go on rumors. So to protect her, virtue in that case.
Wow,
so it reminds me of that because it was unclear whether what she did with Boaz before they were married. So I was like, I will have to give her the benefit of the doubt.
Very good. Yes. Yes, we don't know what happened. She does look really guilty, both actually. But the text seems to be really, the narrator, the people, everybody seems to be turning a blind eye. I mean, as though they know something deeper is going on, right? So this is really showing how sometimes when we are too stuck on, kind of like me with my friend, right? I had this view like, yeah, this is wrong. And then I start to enter this deeper level of reality where I'm realizing, okay, I see what's happening, right? It's not wrong in the sense that I thought, right? So very often we get stuck in our very narrow views of good and evil, and we don't see the deeper thing going on. And so the people in this book actually, very interesting, the way that they just, you know, let it go. Nobody's making a fuss about anything, right? Everybody's turning a blind eye at the right moment, right? The elders, Naomi, Boaz, the people in the threshing floor. So yes, and I love the story about Aisha because it highlights something interesting. This notion of the evidence, you know, even in the time of Jesus, there was no such provision, it seems, because remember, they bring this adulterous woman with no proof, and they want her to be stoned. So this is even more progressive, that there is actually in the Quran details about how we need proof against the woman, right? So I'm actually appreciating that a lot. I think there's a little bit in the Hebrew Bible, but I have to look for it. But I like that there is actually a whole section, right, in connection to something that happened to his wife. So that's very, very interesting. Thank you. Nice. Okay, let's see. Williams is seeing the invisible hand in the text. You are correct. Let me give you the technicality for that. So the expression, I mentioned this before, bimikre, right? When you see in the text written, it happened, or it came to pass, whatever, right? And it seems like just luck. The same expression, I have the text now, is used, okay, where is it? I had it in front of me. It was in Genesis. It happened, it came to pass, or sorry, bemikre also means as luck would have it, right? By chance, right? Now, in the book of Genesis, we have the same expression. This is why we can read like Williams is saying, an invisible hand. Book of Genesis 24:12. If you remember that story, this is when Eliezer is sent by Abraham to find a wife for Isaac. Eliezer is the servant of Abraham. So he goes all the way to the house of Rebecca over there, the relatives of Abraham in the east. And he prays before he meets the chosen one. He prays to God and he says to him, grant me good fortune, grant me luck. And then immediately comes Rebecca, right? And he realizes it's her. So same expression. In Genesis, it means to show that God is going to orchestrate the event. And so when we find it again in Ruth, even though God is not mentioned, the readers of the Bible know, God is orchestrating. Are you seeing the connection? All of you, put your hand if you're seeing what I'm saying from the Hebrew, right? So Williams, you have here some textual evidence, right, for the notion that there is an invisible hand, and the text itself alludes to it through this Hebrew expression, which we find the same in Genesis to talk about God's orchestrating the situation. So here too, it seems we have that going on. Great. Okay, let's see. Colon. Colon. Good question. Is Colon here? Where is Colon? There you are. Emerging from wherever you were lying down. Okay. He doesn't like the name Ruth, and I have to admit, neither do I, right? But the meaning is interesting. Ruth actually means in the Hebrew Bible saturated, like really watered, lots of water. Interesting. The text begins in the time when there is a drought, right? And Ruth means the one who is well watered. Let me say it like this. Ruth actually means well watered one. That could be like her Indian name, right? Well watered one. So anybody have any ideas why the author would give her this name in the context of the story, which begins with a drought? Anybody want to expound on that a little bit? Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
Is it because Ruth is going to come in and kind of like fill everyone with love, kindness, and like wisdom in a way?
You can say that, right? She's overflowing with love, right? And so in a way, she waters everyone around her. There's another way to understand it too. Christodoulou, go ahead.
Yeah, it could also be seen as like a famine of like justice at the time, like a famine of the laws. That there was like so much going on, and then she, through her lineage, will bring like order to the land.
Yes, if this, I haven't told you guys this yet, but the line of David, right, is coming through Boaz, who apparently there was no heir, right? It seems that Boaz perhaps had no children. Maybe he was married, right, but perhaps didn't have a child. Ruth arrives and ensures that a child comes, which will be the lineage of King David. So in a way, the lineage was stuck, was cut off. There was a drought also not only in the land, but in the genealogy, right? And if it's cut off, you can't go on with the, because for them, remember, it's the different children that bring eventually the Messiah, right? If there's no more children, no more Messiah, no more saving the world goes to hell, right? If there's not this lineage that continues and builds towards this messianic figure who is supposed to save the whole world. So they were stuck, they were cut off, and Ruth comes in a way and revitalizes the genealogy, and then King David emerges, and then eventually, of course, if we want to be Christian about it, Jesus, right? So this is Ruth. Without Ruth, no King David. Without Ruth, no Jesus. And therefore, no redemption of the world, no golden age of Jerusalem, right? And nothing, right? So that's kind of the meaning of the story, is that she, in a way, revitalizes, and we'll talk, of course, about that. So good question. Olivera, interesting point. Is Ruth an example of what we learned in Ecclesiastes of surrender versus grasping? For sure, and we're going to look at that today, actually, right now. And then finally, Edmonds. Yes, you were the one who mentioned that Ruth seems like a very anticlimactic character after Ecclesiastes and Job, right, where we have these powerful, right,
Yeah.
rebellious figures. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think it's necessarily so much that she's not powerful in her own way. I think it's just that, in those two, we see people that are actively questioning their faith, wrestling with these big questions. And here Ruth is, and she's this sort of very modest person who's just, trusting that she's just going to follow her best instincts and hope that things work out, sort of the ecclesiastical sort of mode of thinking. And it's working out. It works out for her. And it's like, oh, well, here we go. This is that.
That's good, but don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. She seems very tame, but she's not. She's a woman,
I hear you.
a lioness, right? We're going to look at that. We have to go in the text to really see that. Okay, so, Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
Well, I don't think that Ruth is a tame character at all. I mean, we're not really hearing from her, in Job and in Ecclesiastes. Especially in Ecclesiastes, Solomon is writing out his thoughts, in this long thing. In this book, we're just hearing like a really short narration on Ruth's life. It's not like she's telling us her thoughts or anything. So we have to just, we have to kind of assume what she's thinking.
And moreover, she speaks, and the times that she speaks is like, whoa.
Yeah, and she does things that are, that she's not supposed to do, and takes big steps. So I don't think that she is.
Yeah, Ruth is less of a thinker than somebody who speaks and who does, right? She's much more aggressive in the way that she's actually living and making decisions and saying, changing the course of history, whereas these guys are more in a kind of philosophical reflection, right? So it's a different character also, but we'll see. Okay, Rudolph, yes, before we go into...
You said it, and earlier, look, I don't think she is saying much, but her actions speak for her thoughts. And the actions are a result of one main fabric there, one main thread in the thought fabric saying, enough of all the nonsense, guys. Look, this is what I'm going to do, and you better do it or else. Because she's just moving forward and doesn't take any prisoners, doesn't really care that she breaks the law, is really out for her own benefit. Good for her. You know, go girl. I mean, there is a certain level of admiration in my questioning what I wrote today, because, you know, if you transpose it into today's times, it would say, don't be held back by any social norms.
Yeah.
Just question everything. Do it in a way that is not egregious, so that there is no blood and no dead bodies. But do it in a way that you not only question the system, in quotes, but you change it. You make it work for yourself. You look at angles that you can interpret, where nobody can say, well, that's a little borderline, but not criminal. So, you know, it's very interesting what's happening here. I'm surprised that it happens that early on in civilization.
Yeah.
It's pretty profound what kind of actions she takes as a liberated woman.
Yeah, very nicely, right? She doesn't provoke the system in her words, but in her actions, she's breaking down the whole thing, right? So, yes, I love that. One little detail, though, that I wanted to nuance what you were saying. When she's going to Boaz, it's not for her. We have misunderstood that. Everything she does in the whole book is for Naomi, right? So when she's going to Boaz under the advice of Naomi, she is thinking less of herself than of Naomi, of ensuring that Naomi has protection, right? Family, wealth. Because Boaz himself is shocked to see her there, and he says, why? You could have gone with anyone. Why did you pick me? Because there's at least a 40-year difference between the two. Ruth is actually probably in her 30s or 40s, right? She's pretty young. Boaz is, we know, is around his 70s or 80s. So Boaz is shocked to see her, and he tells her, you could have been with anyone. Why did you pick me? And that's when he says, your loving kindness is even greater than, right? So Ruth is not really, I know we make it seem like, oh, this is a beautiful love story, Walt Disney style. There are some things we need to realize, right? That this is the equivalent of, you know, basically, I mean, she's really picking a sugar daddy right there.
Exactly.
For Naomi, not for her. She can fend for herself, right? She's doing great. She's young, she's strong, she's thinking further. So we'll talk about this, actually, this notion of kindness that Ruth has and where it leads her. But so I wanted to nuance that. Great. I won't even need to lecture today. We'll just cover everything like this. Williams and then Crystal Dulu.
I was gonna say, if you look at this, like the Voting Rights Act in the 1890s, women actually were very contentious about the voting rights in the United States because of the fact that they gave up the illegitimate power that women have behind the scenes of men, the ability to manipulate and change. No, this is like a real argument that like rich women talked about, and were like, listen, if we get the right to vote, we're not going to be able to manipulate society in the background because we're going to be able to vote. And because like it takes us out of the domestic space, so I could negotiate with my husband and say, listen, you're not gonna get no sex unless you vote, or you're not gonna do this, or you're not gonna do that. And I could see the roots of that in Ruth's journey with society at the time, because she's basically doing that by basically having all these hidden interactions or trying to get around the rules. And like and actually that's a discourse in modern sociology where they talk about women's rights, and they say like American society changed because women went to work. And I'm like, won't always work. That don't fucking matter, but it's whatever.
Good, very nice. I appreciate what you're saying, because we are seeing here how within patriarchy, women can be extremely empowered. And I think this is what we miss when we go to other countries and say, let us liberate your women. And the women tell us we are already free. We don't need you to liberate. There's a whole discourse actually right now of women who are not Western, right? And who kind of are pushing back on feminism, on the model of liberation that is presented by feminism, because they say we are already free. We look oppressed to you, but we are not, because we have this back door over here where we have a lot of power. And the book of Ruth in a way is showing, right, the backdoor power of women, right? So that's interesting. Very nice. Christodoulou, you had something to add?
Yeah, yeah. It seemed like Boaz was kind of a warm body with enough money to support Naomi and Ruth. Like, it doesn't seem like that there was any love there. Like, it was just kind of like opportunistic on their part. It's very strange. Like, on the face of it, it's a very strange story to tell people. But I understand it's like the lengths to which people will go for love.
Yeah. Also, you know, the text actually is a little more charitable than you. It's not. It's, yes, it is a business transaction, but there is an element of deep connection between them. And we see, so they're not just randomly, right? Ruth is not all about the money, right? And neither is Boaz all about the sex, or because that's all he'll be getting in the story, right? So there, we can sense from the beginning a powerful connection between them in the field, right? Before the threshing floor, he notices her, right? So there is some attraction on his part. And then we see also the text, when the text is juxtaposing them as describing both of them as warrior, right, having warrior spirits, the text is implying that there is a deep connection, metaphysical, spiritual connection between them, right? So the text, so yes, it's not like, you know, we're not here with, you know, butterflies and roses, right? But the text is implying that there is a deep spiritual connection, that they're soulmates. That's what the text is saying. When the text is calling her Eshet Chayil and then calling him Gibor Chayil, we know the text is saying these two are soulmates and they were meant to be together. And somehow it was, or so it is. Hebrew stories are very romantic. They're not corny, but they're very romantic, right? So we're not in the corniness here, but we are definitely in soulmate territory. Does that help a little, Christodoulou? Yeah, so the text is not as ruthless, right? It's not just about a sugar daddy, but it is also. But beyond the sugar daddy, there's this deep connection between the two, which really sparks the whole story, right? It's not her sitting with Naomi on a balcony looking down at Boaz and being like, yeah, him, you go now. No, first Boaz notices her, and then Naomi kicks in and says, okay, let's work this. Right? So, but she didn't do it until Boaz noticed Ruth. So we can't say that Boaz was coerced. We can just say that Naomi is looking at this and saying, let me work this and see how far we can go with this, right? But there is certainly attraction between the two. And Naomi sees that, and she seizes the opportunity and makes something out of it, right? So maybe that helps Giannakopoulos a little bit with his disappointment in the text. I don't know. What do you think? Rudolph, go ahead.
I mean, look, I don't think it's all a sex story right here, and there might be some platonic attraction between the two of them. It's more like a business deal. Look, if any one of you has done business in the city of New York, you know that this is a small marketplace and competition is high. So you develop certain business mechanisms that drive you. And when you run into someone who is operating with the same speed, with the same intelligence, with the same cunning, with the same kind of know-how about the marketplace with you, even though they are competing with you, you can't help yourself but admire them. And most of times you make business friends through these interactions. And that's what I see here. So I'm opposed to calling this story the warm and fuzzy love story about the goodness of everyone and how God wonderfully makes everybody, you know, really positive and happy. That's not what's happening here. It's actually a quite realistic storytelling of look, there's a purpose in life, and if you can make it work in this way, good for you. There's two people who met themselves, maybe one is 40 years older than the other one, but they had same goals. They aligned themselves in their wisdom, female wisdom versus male wisdom, mother's house versus father's house. They made it all work under the eyes of God with the sanctioning of the law. It was all good. So this is ideal. What a business transaction. I love it.
Okay, I love that. I love the way you put it. And yes, I like the way you're saying that. I had it on the tip of my tongue what I was going to say, and now it's just escaping me. What was it? It was important. Bummer. Okay, I completely forgot what I was going to say in response to what you just said. It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me. Thank you. Good. Anything else before I just give you a brief, brief summary of chapters 1 and 2? Good. All right, so let me just say, I actually like to teach this text, I think Williams will be happy, as a self-help book. So I've been reading this book as a woman and trying to understand, you know, about what it means to be a woman, what can I learn, what can we learn in terms of relationships and so forth. So I'm just going to say a few words about those 2 first chapters and what we can draw from them for us in our personal lives, right? So I'm going to make it very what's the word? Not preachy, but there's another word more technical. Giannakopoulos, you're the technical one. Tell me, homiletic. Homiletic is what I'm looking for. Homiletic is like a sermon. Homiletic, right? I'm using a big word, so it's the equivalent, is the academic equivalent of preachy or self-help. So let me say, this is what I noticed, which I thought was really beautiful and instructive for us in our lives, is that Ruth, I'm seeing Ruth in this whole text with only one goal, taking care of Naomi, right? I emphasized this when I talked, even when she's seducing Boaz, because that's what she's doing, right? We'll talk about that. Even when she's seducing Boaz, it's not about her. She doesn't need Boaz. She can fend for her own. She's young, she can get remarried, she has muscles, she can work. She's still thinking of ensuring that Naomi has a safe place, right? So from the beginning to the end, the very end, when her child is taken away and put on the lap of Naomi, we see how far she will go for that woman, right? So she is entirely defined by the Hebrew word that we learned, chesed, loving kindness, which I will now define a little more, right? Ruth is entirely, her whole trajectory is love, right? And not any kind of love, not just, you know, little feelings or butterflies, right? This is the kind of love which goes beyond duty, right? We have duty, and then we have love. Chesed in the Hebrew it doesn't just mean love, it means undeserved love. That's what it actually means, right? Chesed. And when you hear in the New Testament about the word grace, charis is a translation of chesed, right? Which means undeserved love, right? So if people who say there is no grace in the Hebrew Bible, obviously have not read the book of Ruth, where you have this notion of undeserved love. So throughout the text, you have this leitmotif of her bestowing love on people who don't deserve it. I mean, look at the first one with Naomi. Naomi just is moving back by herself. And Ruth is like, let me come with you, let me take care of you. And Naomi's like, no, go back, go back, go back. In kind of a snappy way. I don't know if you read the text like me, but she falls silent. After that, it's like, just like, whatever. And they walk in silence. I mean, look at the text. Ruth has just told Naomi, your God will be your God, my God. Your people will be my people. Your house, whatever, I forget. Where you die, I will die. I mean, this is a declaration of love. Does Naomi say anything back? Doesn't respond. Same with Adam and Eve. Remember when Adam is like, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, and Eve is like nowhere to be seen, right? So Naomi in this story, at least in the beginning, is kind of bitter. In fact, she changes her name to bitterness. If you notice, when she says, call me Mara, this is bitterness in Hebrew. So, and Naomi actually means sweetness originally, right? So it's interesting. Her name originally is Sweetness, and she shifts to being a very bitter woman, right? So Ruth is hanging on to this woman who is very bitter and who doesn't even want her along. And Naomi, I'm feeling is kind of like, yo, let me go back home. I don't want nothing to do with y'all anymore. I'm done with this phase of my life. I'm going home. You're just going to be like a dead weight for me. And in fact, you don't even know the welcome you'll get in Israel. And I'm not even going to tell you, because over there, you're a woman of ill repute. This is what's going in Naomi's head, right? And yet here's Ruth, full of love, right? hanging on to this woman. And like we mentioned with Anderson, right? She is really, we have to understand the level of sacrifice. In following Naomi, she's sacrificing any prospect of remarriage. Basically, she's sacrificing her whole womanly destiny, right? No husband, no kids, just helping this old woman, right? So she's really, this is sacrificial love, right? In the sense that we read also in the New Testament. And then with Boaz, nobody asked Ruth if she's attracted to Boaz, right? It's like, we know Boaz is attracted to her. We know Naomi needs a sugar daddy, right? And Ruth just understands that. And even Boaz is shocked, and he looks at her and he's like, why are you here with me? You could have been with any of these guys, right? So Ruth is continuously, right, sacrificial throughout the text. And what's interesting is that in following the trajectory of love, she ends up finding love, right? And that's what I want to talk about a little bit, because this is really interesting for us nowadays in our relationships, right? So I'm getting to the self-help part now, right? You know how you're in a relationship and at one point you're like, this isn't working for me and I need to protect myself and make the right decision for myself, and I'm going to break it off, right? What the text is saying is that if we choose love, no matter how much it looks like we're wasting time, or no matter how much it looks like we're with the wrong person or whatever, if we're choosing love, eventually we will find love, right? The text is saying if you're choosing self-protection, you will find a good arrangement, but you will not find your soulmate, right? Which is what really Ruth is finding in the end, right? This is, we know the text is hinting that this is her soulmate, right? This is the equal, right? In metaphysical sense, they're equal. So this is a notion that when we are faced with a decision, what should I do in this relationship or in general? Do I protect myself or do I love? In general, we choose self-protection. But the text is saying, choose love, and inevitably you will be led to your soulmate. Too often we choose self-protection because we think that's the path to finding our soulmate. I need to protect myself and find the right person for me, right? Text is saying, no, just love. And eventually you'll stumble, bemikre, in the field where your soulmate is waiting, right? So I thought that was very powerful, especially nowadays where we are taught, protect yourself, put boundaries, make the right choice, right? Choose yourself, right? Text is saying something very different. Ruth is never at any point choosing herself. And yet she stumbles onto not only her soulmate, but what a soulmate, right? This is the genealogy of King David, right? So very, very powerful destiny that she stumbles upon because she chooses love, right? So that's the first thing I was noticing. And I want to hear your comments a little bit. Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
Yeah, Professor, I love that you bring that up because I completely agree. A lot of times, young people, especially nowadays, we think that love is exciting. You know, it's like a feeling. It's fun, right? And then they find out when the love dries out that it's not love. But that's not true. Love is your commitment to that person, right? So even when the times get hard, and it is really hard to love them, you still choose to love them because that's the commitment you made to them. And so a lot of young people will think, oh, now that it's boring, it must mean that the love has dried out and not love anymore. But that's not true. And it completely resonates with what you're saying because, yeah, you're at this crossroad where you think you don't love them, but you actually do. And if you choose love, it will lead to love. You know, love always prevails. It's in one of the epistles.
Yep.
I think from St. Paul to the Corinthians or something.
Corinthians, yeah.
He goes, love will always prevail.
Yeah, very nice.
And that's very true.
Yeah, I agree with you, right? Very often we don't choose love, we choose ourselves, right? And in that sense, we lose the potential relationship we could have had, which is to the degree of what Ruth had with Boaz, right? Williams.
No, I was going to say, but it's deceptive, I think, to certain retrospects, because I know a whole bunch of women who got married and they're still married and slogging through like relationships that aren't fulfilling. And I feel like it's a balance between like knowing yourself, like Boaz and his partner's relationship is balanced. But I think if you read this classically, like I have a friend who's very religious and she won't get divorced, even though her husband's kind of like a jerk. And she's just like, I feel like I'm going to fail. But I said, it's not a fail. I said, like, God had to, if God didn't want divorce to exist, it wouldn't exist. And I feel like sometimes it's about this balance between knowing, like, sometimes God is telling you, you got to get divorced. It's going to save your sanity. And then other times it's about following through. But I said, you have to know how to make that decision. And I feel like a lot of women, you don't get those choices. You kind of will go towards a marriage that'll be dead, or a relationship that'll be dead, and you'll still keep trying to persevere just because things like this tell you to do so.
Yeah, very good. I mean, in fact, there's a little known fact in the Hebrew Bible that God got divorced. Did you know this?
No.
So,
Yeah,
I will explain. Many women don't know this about God, that he got divorced. When he sent the Hebrews over to Babylon, what do you think he was doing? Getting them on a cruise, a vacation, in a spa, that sea salts? No, this was a divorce, right? When he ships them, when he says, we're done here, I'm destroying the land, I'm destroying the temple, and you're over there in Babylon, and of course they end up back together, right? But this is a divorce. When you destroy the temple, this was basically telling them, I'm not living with you anymore. If that's not a divorce, I don't know what is, right? So God himself separated, right? So now what I would advise, what many women don't understand is the option they have to separate and to create the distance necessary for the change to take place. This is something we don't teach, right? We teach either you stay and you're a victim, or you get divorced and you never hear from this guy again. But God is showing an interesting middle way where he's saying you can separate and see then what comes out of that separation. And we saw that the Hebrews in Babylon actually remained faithful, right? They came back and God brought them back. But there is certainly a very powerful act of separation. If we don't need to call it divorce, since God, I think himself says, you will always be mine. But he separates, very powerful, doesn't live with them anymore. He destroys the house in which they live together. Basically, the destruction of the temple, that is what it means. I am not living with you anymore. And we see how the distance that God has created, it creates the conditions of possibility for change. And so I think one thing that we could teach women is the prerogative that they have to separate, and then to see what comes out of that separation, right? Because even God did that, right? But I agree with you, right? There are moments where love will prescribe divorce, and there are moments where love will prescribe staying together. And when I say choose love, I don't necessarily say stay in the marriage, because sometimes love will prescribe to you to leave the marriage for the sake of stopping the abuse, which is destroying not only you but them, right? So but the idea is here, what I tell people who are telling me this argument that you're saying, Williams, well, sometimes we have to separate. I'm saying you can separate, but look at your motivation. Is your motivation yourself, or is your motivation love, right? And love, it's true, sometimes will dictate to you to separate. I have seen that, right? And so the idea is Ruth could have followed the trajectory of love and not married Boaz, right? Because we don't know where, right? So sometimes love tells us stick it out, but there are really good moments also where love will tell you, you need to cut this off, you need to leave, or just separate, or divorce. It depends on the situation, and it depends what love is prescribing, because sometimes it is more loving to leave somebody who is about to kill you, more loving to them, right, than to stay and be killed, right? So I agree with you, Williams, but I would say that the intention can still be love even then. Does that make sense, Williams?
Yeah, it makes sense. I wasn't arguing about the intention. It was more about the fact that, like, I've seen enough women who will because I did my undergraduate thesis and I was studying women and how, like, especially Asian women, how they like deal with racism in romantic relationships. And romantic relationships will be unbalanced, and you just be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And you would just be like, all right, whatever, like, just do whatever. But so like I can understand how people would stay around, but like, good.
Yeah, good. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what women need to learn is, to love, but also to set boundaries. This is the missing piece of the puzzle, right? We can love and still set boundaries. Love doesn't mean you accept everything, right? And this is what we are not taught, at least on that level. Very nice. Giannakopoulos, go ahead, enlighten us. and then
You know, I think there are like countless reasons as to why marriages fail. But I want to say, like, I'm a psychology major, and I like to learn a lot about relationships. That's like really important to me. So marriage especially. So like the biggest reason as to why marriages fail is because they get into it. They say, okay, I love this person, I want to get married, but they don't take any precautionary steps to make sure that their marriage lasts and that it works well. You know, so they won't have really important talks like, how do we plan on raising kids, or how do we plan on tallying up household work, chores and such. So these little things become big problems, or they don't talk about how to properly communicate. You know, it's one of the biggest reasons that marriages fail is communication.
Good.
So there's like countless reasons as to why they fail, but taking precautionary steps and choosing that love is actually the biggest reason as to why you guys got together and you want to keep it alive. You know?
One of the biggest contributions of the Song of Songs, in my view, is how much wisdom there is as to how to love, right? We are told love, but we're not told how. And I'm sorry, we don't have that much time for the Song of Songs. You have the book, but I'll give you a little taste of some of the deep wisdom in that book given to women who are dealing with difficult relationships, which include, in the case of the Song of Songs, infidelity. And we're going to see how the text is giving us insights as to how to navigate that, right? So there is plenty of guidelines in the Hebrew Bible, but they are not studied. So it's very sad, especially the guidelines, of course, are in the wisdom text. You can't read the 10 Commandments and have any idea how to make your marriage work apart. Don't cheat, right? This is not enough, right? So the Mother's House text, the wisdom texts that are, you know, focused on a feminine wisdom actually have a lot of wisdom to give as to what you're talking about, Giannakopoulos. So it's good you're taking this class. Rudolph, go ahead.
Well, let me start with saying, Mr. Giannakopoulos, where is Elena when you need her? I mean, you should have written down what you just said. It is a love letter. Good for you, pal. Going on, I'd like to challenge what you said about what you, Professor, said about Ruth really wanting to take care of Naomi. I am taking a risk in being so critical to say, why can't we look at the entire scenario, believing or investigating that Ruth even used Naomi and Naomi's situation in order to further her own situation?
One point that can go along with what you're saying is the moment when she's talking to Boaz on the threshing floor. And instead of saying exactly what Naomi said, which is, you are the Redeemer, talking about the land, she says, you are the Redeemer and we need to get married. At that moment, she's off script. And yes, at that moment, you can say that maybe she also desires it. Yes, so I would agree with you that there is a moment where Ruth gets off the script and talks about marriage. And so perhaps there is here a movement of her own heart, right? That intervenes in the script. And she's not only asking anymore for him to buy the territory, the land back and so forth. She's saying, marry me. This is an interesting, beautiful moment where a woman proposes to a man, right? And also in the Song of Songs, there's a passage where she's actually proposing to him. So we are in the Mother's House is pretty crazy, right? Yeah, the women who are making the marriage proposals and the men who are saying yes. So yes, so I agree with you. To your point, yes, there is a moment where she takes her own life in her hands. And I like the way you mentioned that because I hadn't seen that, but you're right. At that moment, she takes her own destiny and she goes beyond the script of just thinking of others. She is at that moment expressing something deep within herself. So thank you. Yes, and that is beautiful, of course, that a woman can actually pierce through the not only patriarchy, but matriarchy, right? Where you're under the tutelage of the older women. She actually breaks both down and says, me, I want to marry you. Right? So yes, I love that. So the agency of Ruth is what you're highlighting. The agency with regards to patriarchy, but also the agency with regards to matriarchy, with the power of that woman. She goes further and she says, I, Ruth, right, marry me. So very nice. I love that. Thank you, Rudolph. Beautiful. Okay, man, this is brilliant. I think we should be like, you know, I don't know, this whole class today was just like, we should be famous, guys. We should be famous. Okay, last little lesson that I learned that I would just want to say in conclusion. I love how in this story you have an example of like attracting like. Let me write this here. Like attracts like. You know this saying, right? Like attracts like. I know we say opposites attract, but there's the same say. There's another saying which says that like attracts like, and we know that in this story. In the story, they are so alike, right? Through the name. Remember, I told you, Eshet Chayil, Gibor Chayil. The narrator is saying these are two pieces of the same soul, right? They are soulmates. And somehow in the text, she ends up attracting, or he ends up attracting his soulmate just by being, right, herself. And so there are some lessons here, right, in the sense that if we want to have an amazing man or woman in our lives, we need to become an amazing man and woman. And to attract our soulmate, we need to become our true selves, right? I teach that when I teach the philosophy of love class that I do in 104. We do the text on Plato of Aristophanes, which talks about the soulmate, and we see the same thing. We attract who we are. If you want to find your soulmate, become the best version of yourself, right? And so in this text, in a way, Ruth is really the best version of herself. She is Eshet Chayil, she's a warrior woman. And she doesn't even need to do anything. She doesn't go online. She doesn't, right? She doesn't go prospecting. She doesn't go to parties. She just is. And she attracts this guy. And the same for him. He's not out there, right, trying to get, laid or whatever. He's not doing anything. He just is. And he attracts her. So there's power, I think. The text is telling us, just to go back to the self-help, right? The text is telling us there's so much power in becoming your best self. If you want to attract your soulmate, you don't need to do anything. You have to be. You have to be something. Once you become that, it will just come your way, right? So beautiful story for me where neither of them are trying to find. She's not trying to find a husband and he's not trying to find a wife. And yet because they are so fully themselves, they end up effortlessly attracting each other, right? So in that sense, a beautiful story here in terms of some dating advice. Giannakopoulos, go ahead.
Man, Professor, I gotta say, I absolutely love everything you said about that because it's so true. In my church, I mean, I've not been told this by my bishop. He goes, don't date unless you're ready to get married. And that is so true. And I also tell this to my friends that are looking to date. I say, are you the kind of guy that you would want your daughter to date? And if that's not true, then don't date. You're not ready, So like you said, become the best version of yourself. And naturally, you will find that person that you will want to be with. It's funny because that's actually how me and Eleni got together. For years, I hadn't dated anybody. And eventually she just came into my life and I was like, okay, I'm ready, So it's funny that you say that because I completely agree. You have to be your best version of yourself because once you get married, it's not like you just change 180, And just like there are a lot of times people say, oh, I can change him or I can change her. That's not true. Most people don't change for others. You have to really change for yourself, And so you have to be the best version of yourself on your own,
Very nice. Yes, excellent. I'm starting to really like your bishop. You should introduce us.
I think you would really like him. Bishop Solis, I think you would really like him.
Very good. I saw another hand. Where'd it go? Gone? Y'all just want to go home. That's what it is. Like, no more hands. It's just, please, let's stop this. Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to conclude. What we're going to do next time is the seduction of Boaz, right? And then we're going to end with the rejuvenation of Israel, right? So these are the two themes we'll do. So you don't need to do anything. You can just relax and we'll finish Ruth next week. And I'm sorry, tomorrow. And then we'll start. You can already start reading John if you want, because we'll be starting with that right away. All right, guys, I'm going to stop the recording.